Off the Wall. My name is Trey. Thank you so much for joining me today. Hope all is going well in your world. No shortage of things and stuff to get into in the indoor and arena football world. We'll start off the show with a recap of IFL Week 11, talk about some of the games that happened, some of the teams that are looking really, really good and getting better, some of the teams that are continuing to regress a little bit, and then we'll do a preview of IFL Week 12 and look at some of the matchups that are going to happen next weekend. Then we have an interview with Massachusetts Pirates linebacker Calvin Bundage. The Pirates defense has been one of the top defenses in all the IFL this season, and Calvin is a major reason why. So we'll talk about his indoor football journey, the Pirates team this year, and why the defense is performing so well, as well as some other stuff that we're not going to get into now, but you'll have to wait and see on the interview itself. Or if you want to skip ahead to the timestamp, that's okay too. Do you? And then last but not least, we'll dive into IFL Week 5, talk about some of the games that actually were played, and then talk about the landscape of the AFL, because some things have happened since the last time we recorded and released an episode here. So some updates to share with you, and I'll give some of my thoughts on some of those things as well. But before we dive into any of that, we gotta do some social plugs, do some ratings plugs, and all that stuff. So if you're not following us on social already, please do at Off the Wall FB, F as in foot, B as in ball. We're on Instagram, X, aka Twitter, and TikTok, doing all sorts of different things on each of those. So would be thrilled if you gave us a follow on there. And then if you're watching on YouTube or listening on YouTube, I guess, please give us a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel if you're not already. And if you want, share this link with somebody that you think would enjoy arena football. Maybe they haven't experienced it before, and this could be the gateway to them joining our little community that we have here. And even if you think that they wouldn't enjoy arena football, go ahead and share it with them anyway. Let's fight the good fight. Let's try to get them on board. But all seriousness, if you want to like and subscribe to the channel and share this with anybody that you think would enjoy it, that would be greatly appreciated. And then if you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, please give us a 5-star rating, preferably on the podcast page itself. On Spotify, you got to click through, not on the individual episode, but on the show page, and it should be right at the top. But on Apple Podcasts, you got to click through to the show page, and you got to scroll down past some of the episodes, and it should be at the bottom. So that feeds the algorithm and helps us get in front of more people that may be interested in the podcast here a little bit more organically and help grow this thing out a little bit. So would be much appreciated if you did that. Again, that's at Off the Wall FB on all the socials. And if you want to give us a rating and like on whatever platform you're listening or watching us on now, that'd be greatly appreciated. But now that all that is done, let's dive into IFL Week 11. The first game we're going to talk about is the Green Bay Blizzard at the Iowa Barnstormers, and Green Bay won this game 54-40. And Green Bay has been known to be able to run the ball all season. It's what they do. It's Big Ten football. Run the ball, play defense. That's them. And what they typically do is they jab you. And what I mean by that is they'll jab you with a 3-yard run up the middle. They'll jab you with a 4-yard run to the left. They'll jab you with another 3-yard run to the right. Really take it to you on the ground, but then they'll lull you to sleep with the jab, and then they'll throw a right hook. They'll throw an uppercut with a deep bomb to one of their receivers on a play action, or a medium gain play to move the ball down the field. That's typically how Green Bay has operated on offense so far this year. But in this game in particular, they didn't waste any time with any jabs. They went straight with an uppercut and a right hook straight from the beginning. They had their very first play of the game was a 30-yard pass to Lowell Patron, and the next drive they had a 40-yard bomb to Harry Ballard to set up the E.J. Burgess rushing touchdown. So in the first 3 plays on offense for the Blizzard, they scored 2 touchdowns, which is not very characteristic of them up to this point. So the Blizzard offense is continuing to evolve, and the fact that they were able to come out and be pass first and have the running game supplement that a little bit showed a little bit of a switch from what Green Bay typically is or has been up to this point of the season. Quarterback Max Mailer looked great in this game, and it's refreshing to see this as they head into the back half of the season. The Blizzard defense was bending a little bit in the first half. Iowa had a different starting quarterback. Kyle King reportedly has a torn labrum in his shoulder, so we'll see how long he is out. But they had their original starting quarterback, Darius James Peterson, starting the game, and Green Bay has some experience playing against him. So they're bending a little bit in the first half, but in the fourth quarter specifically, they pitched a shutout. They didn't allow any points to be scored. So they took a little bit of adjusting early on, but they eventually got it figured out and held on so that their offense could take care of business. But Max Mailer's looking good. And the passing game for Green Bay was the big question mark for me in particular, because we know they can run the ball, but could the passing game be consistent moving forward? If this game was any indication of what that could look like, the answer could be yes. So they look very good. They're sitting at 7-2, tied for first in the Eastern Conference. And the team that they're sharing first place with is a team they just beat by 30 plus last week in Frisco. So you got to be feeling pretty good if you're a Green Bay Blizzard fan. On the other side, Iowa looked pretty good for the most part in this game, all things considered. They just couldn't keep up with Green Bay for all four quarters. They got off to a pretty good start, which is a very different approach than what we've seen from Iowa in the past. They got to a very good start, but then just couldn't finish. Like I said, Darius James Peterson was starting at quarterback. He didn't have a great game, but he was able to keep them in it for the most part. But the real MVP of Iowa for this game was kicker Gabriel Rui. He was absolute monster. He connected on 2 field goals, including a 50-yarder to open scoring of the game. He had 4 extra points and then 3 deuces on kickoffs to really keep the Barnstormers in it. They were nickel and dime in the scoreboard all throughout the first 3 quarters, and Gabriel Rui was a major reason why. He ended up accounting for 16 points on the day. So when your kicker shows up for 16 points, that's pretty good. You really got to hope that Kyle King's injury isn't serious and he's not going to be out for a super long time, but it's looking like it's going to be a little bit longer than you may anticipate. For Iowa, you can't help but feel like this was a last gasp. They were in it. They were in this game for the first 3.5 quarters. They're sitting at 2-7 on the season right now. And in the Eastern Conference, historically, 9-7 might get you in the door. So in order for them to get to 9-7, to potentially make the playoffs, they have to win the next 7 games in a row. And just judging by what we've seen from Iowa to this point, no matter what quarterback is in there, I just don't think that's going to happen. It's not impossible, but it just seems very unlikely given the schedule that they have ahead of them. We'll see if Iowa can go on a miracle run, but this might have been the last ditch effort for Iowa to be able to stay alive for a potential playoff spot, but we'll see what happens. Next game we're going to talk about is the Tulsa Oilers at the Massachusetts Pirates. And typically, low scoring games in the IFL, you'll see like a 40-30, 40-35, somewhere in that range. This game was much lower scoring than any game I've seen in the IFL this season or in any prior season. This game's final score was 23-22, and the Pirates walked away with a victory here. This game was about as ugly as they come. Neither offense looked really good, and both teams had multiple chances to truly take control of this game, and they didn't. There were 7 field goals attempted in this game by both teams combined. Only one of them was made. We had misses, we had blocked field goals, we had field goals that were returned because they were short. It was just an ugly display on special teams, an ugly display on offense. You can make the case that the defenses showed up. That's why the offenses weren't able to perform, but it was just a rough go for all parties involved. Starting with Massachusetts, if we're looking for positives, the defense played pretty well and held Tulsa to only 22. And starting with our guy, Calvin Bundage, who we'll talk to in a little bit, he had a terrific game. He had another highlight reel play where he leaped over a running back that was a blitz pickup, and he got a big-time sack that pushed Tulsa out of comfortable field goal range late in the game and really made life difficult for them. But the defense as a whole did a pretty nice job of keeping everything in front of them for the majority of the game. But the Pirates' offense continues to be the thing that is very worrisome if you're a Pirates fan. They seem to be trending in the wrong direction, and I'm not sure what the issue is. I'm going to be honest with you. Quarterback Alejandro Benefield looks like he's preferring to run the ball instead of passing the ball and airing it out. And he put himself in multiple positions in this game versus Tulsa where he was taking some massive hits. And considering that he got shaken up last week and had to be taken out, and he already missed some time earlier this season due to injuries, I'm not sure that's the best thing that he could be doing for himself or the team to this point. Earlier this year, we saw Benefield go 15 for 16, throw 4 touchdowns in a game, and that one incompletion came late. That quarterback seems like a totally different person than the Benefield that we've been seeing these past couple of weeks. Their talent on paper continues to outshine and outclass the production they're actually getting out of them. And they have the resources and tools at their disposal to be a very dangerous offense. They're just not doing it. I'm not sure what the problem is. Isaac Zico has been out due to injury. Is he really that big of a difference maker where he's the difference between your team scoring 40 plus and 20 plus? Very well could be, but it seems like you've got some other pieces on the offense that could be stepping up and stepping in these situations, and they're just not. So I'm not sure if it's something where they need an adjustment in philosophy on the coaches' side, but with the talent this team has, no matter what defense you're playing, you got to be able to score more than 23 points. That's just the way it is. On the other side, Tulsa really found every single way to screw this game up on offense, and it was actually pretty impressive. We had lots of missed field goals, as I alluded to earlier. Play calling was not great all throughout the game, and they absolutely butchered their last drive on offense. So just if you didn't watch the game, here's a brief cliff notes of what happened. They had the ball down one with about 45 seconds left. They they make a play on the sideline, catch it, go out of bounds, 30 seconds left. Clock stops within 1 minute. So what they do is they have one timeout. What they decide to do is run the ball on like a little sweep play. They gain 1 yard, but they don't call the timeout. Clock continues to run. Okay, all right. I guess you want to leave as little time as possible if you think you're going to score, but you've only scored 22 up to this point, so there's no guarantee that you're going to score. So they rush to the line, they hurry up, they try to get people in place, they snap it, they throw it quick, bounces off the wide receiver's hands into the hands of the DB, interception, game over. There was just no reason for them to run the ball in that situation. And if you're going to run the ball, you got to use that timeout so that you have as much time as possible to get your thoughts in order, make sure you have all your T's crossed, all your I's dotted, make sure you have the absolute best play call in that you want for this situation. And this is not the first time Tulsa has done this. They did this in their very first game against Frisco, where they had a chance again to win this in regulation, but they simply ran out of time due to poor time management and poor play calling, if we're just calling it how it is. So 2 games now this season that they could have potentially won if they executed things at a higher level on offense. So they have to get better as soon as possible if they want to stay alive in this hunt for the final playoff spot. Because right now they're sitting at 3-6, and it's not looking great. They have to go on a run very, very soon. Because similar to what we talked about with Iowa, same thing applies with Tulsa here. They got to go on a probably 6-1 run over these last 7 games in order to have a chance. And they have a very, very tough schedule ahead of them. So they have the talent to do it. I'm just not sure if they have the offensive coaching staff in place to really take advantage of what this group of players provides. They're on a 4-game losing streak right now, and they get a pissed off San Diego Strike Force team at home next week. So it's not getting any easier for Tulsa. So they have to get it in order. And if they lose to San Diego next week, we can probably put them in the Iowa camp where their season is looking like a wrap. Next game we're going to talk about is the Duke City Gladiators at the Arizona Rattlers, and Arizona won this game 55-53. Now, it was only a 2-point game, but this should not have been this close. Arizona left the door open for Duke City to come back. So Duke City, they started off very good. They got off to such a hot start. They needed it. They jumped out to a 16-3 lead very quickly. But just as quickly as they jumped to that lead, it became a deficit. They went from leading 16-3 to trailing 19-33 early in the third quarter. So they went from being up 13 to being down 14. They went 26 minutes of game time from the second quarter to the third quarter without scoring a touchdown. And everything just seemed disconnected from what they were doing well early in the game. They had a well-balanced attack. They were attacking through the air and on the ground. Mancuso at quarterback was getting active on the ground early on. The middle just got very muddy, and it was confusing to watch. They weren't doing some of the same things that were working. The defense did a pretty good job of getting them back into the game, but ultimately the hole that they were in was too much for them to come back. They very nearly pulled off a very dramatic comeback attempt, but um, truthfully, they shouldn't have been in that situation to begin with to even have a chance based on how they played in the middle quarters of the game. On the other side, Arizona again had this game in the bag. They were up multiple possessions late in the fourth quarter, but they left the door open for Duke City to make things interesting. And uh, we almost witnessed an all-time great comeback. We were so close. Arizona had an opportunity to run the clock out with under a minute left, but they ran the ball to the short side and they went out of bounds. The ball carrier hit the wall. That stopped the clock. That allowed Duke City to save a timeout. A couple plays later, they threw two back-to-back incomplete passes for a turnover on downs to give Duke City the ball at Arizona's 14 to be able to score a quick touchdown and get back into this game. And not only did Duke City score a quick touchdown, but they had a perfectly executed onside kick by kicker Ernesto Lacayo, where Duke City recovered it. They drove right back down the field, scored again, got another 2-point conversion. So Arizona went from being up double digits with only a couple minutes left in the game to only being up by 2 in the final moments of the game. Luckily for Arizona, Ernesto Lacayo's attempt at the deuce went a little wide right at the end, and that basically sealed it for Arizona to win. But Coach Kevin Guy was not happy in his post-game interview on the field. I'm sure he had some very harsh words for his team for letting that slip through their fingertips. And honestly, if it was a team other than Duke City, who now falls to 0-8 on the season, Arizona probably loses this game, and that's got to be super frustrating for Kevin Guy and his coaching staff, because in the Western Conference, especially, you cannot afford to drop an easy game, or you can't afford to drop a game that's well within your grasp. Right now, they're sitting at 5-4, and they're in fifth place in the Western Conference. Every game is going to count from here on out with how loaded the Western Conference is and how good every single roster on the Western Conference is from top to bottom. Even Duke City. Duke City has a very good roster, and I was thinking about this, and they might be the best 0-8 team the IFL has ever seen because they've been so close to going over the hump multiple times. They just can't seem to put it all together all in one game just yet. So Arizona's got to learn to be able to close out games. And Dalton Snead had a great game through the air. He had 191 passing yards and 6 touchdowns. But the situational IQ of the Rattlers just has to get better moving forward. They were able to white knuckle it and hold on for dear life as this game came to an end. But they're very lucky to walk away with a win, considering how the last couple minutes played out. The next game we're going to talk about is the San Antonio Gunslingers at the Bay Area Panthers. And in this one, Bay Area won 42-31. So we're going to start with San Antonio here. This was the first game of the season where San Antonio's offense got bullied. They just got beat up from the beginning of the game all the way to the end. The Bay Area defense did such a good job of making life difficult for quarterback Sam Castronova, who, as we've discussed on previous weeks, has just been unbelievably good over the past 3-4 weeks, throwing 7 touchdowns a week, throwing for over 200, 250 yards every week, and really putting himself in that MVP conversation. This week was not even close to that because of Rob Keefe's defense and how Bay Area executed. The 31 points that they scored in this game was their lowest mark of the season by far, more than 13 points lower than their next lowest up to this point. So Bay Area just did such a good job of shutting down the Gunslingers offense. But despite how rough they look on offense, the San Antonio defense actually stepped up and kept them in this game. Defensive back Clifton Duck had 2 interceptions that really flipped the momentum of the game for San Antonio and kept them in it and gave them every opportunity to have a puncher's chance at potentially walking away with a win here. They were only down by 3 points late in the third quarter. So it wasn't all bad, but it was just nowhere near the level that we're typically seeing out of San Antonio. Sam Castronova ended up finishing this game 16 for 38 for 174 passing yards and 3 touchdowns before leaving with an injury, which is a far cry from his usual 70+% completion percentage. that he has on the year so far. So we'll have to keep an eye on the Casanova injury to see how this impacts the Gunslingers moving forward. But this was a rough one for San Antonio. On the other side, I said this last week, but it rings true even more so this week. Bay Area is getting better every single week. This was an unbelievable performance by the Bay Area defense. Defensive back Joe Fouché had a fantastic first game back. He had 5 pass breakups and 6 tackles on the day, which is crazy high. The defense was aggressive and they were making their presence known through all 4 quarters. They were hitting all game. They were letting the wide receivers know that, hey, we're here, we're not going anywhere. We're going to remind you every single play. And yeah, defensively, they played such a great game. And quarterback Daquan Neal and running back Shane Simpson combined for 142 rushing yards and 4 touchdowns on the ground as well. So another ground and pound offensive performance with a stout defensive performance as well. And Bay Area was pretty much in control of this game from start to finish. San Antonio got back into it late, but uh, the Bay Area offense retook control in the fourth quarter and stomped on the gas and took off from there. They didn't have to do too much in the passing game in this one just because they dominated the ground so well, but it was a little worrisome that they ended up throwing those 2 picks. And in the event that the defense isn't able to control the game like that in the future and they get into a real back and forth, do they have the capacity as a passing offense to be able to keep up in those situations? They haven't proven that just yet. So the team is starting to look eerily similar to last year's team with a very good quarterback running back ground combination that's very efficient on in terms of yards per carry and rushing touchdowns, and then the defense playing unbelievably well on a week to week basis. So the potential for a back to back run is 100% on the table. Bay Area is looking like they're definitely going to make the playoffs and make some noise from there. So yeah, Bay Area, they look unbelievable and they have a chance to redeem their only losses this season to Vegas a little bit later on. So yeah, Bay Area looks so good. The next game we're going to talk about is the Tucson Sugar Skulls at the Northern Arizona Wranglers. And Northern Arizona won this game 60-53. So a very high scoring game between these two Arizona-based teams. Starting with Northern Arizona, they're quietly piecing together a very impressive season so far up to this point. They're sitting at 6-3, and the only 2 teams ahead of them in the standings right now in the West are Bay Area and Vegas, who are each 8-1. So Northern Arizona is pretty good, and they have a pretty firm grasp on that third playoff spot right now. They've battled in some very tough road games, and they're in a great position considering the schedule that they've played. But their schedule on the back half of the season is a brutal one. So the fact that they're 6-3 right now puts them in a good position moving forward. To give you an idea of the Wranglers' schedule ahead, they've got Vegas, Arizona, both road games. Then they go home to San Antonio, home to San Diego, at Bay Area, Vegas again, and then at Duke City. So that is an absolute gauntlet of the Western Conference that they're going to have to run through, facing Vegas twice and Bay Area once, and San Diego's no joke either. So they're going to be tested over these next couple of weeks. They're going to be tested. Quarterback Joshua Jones had another really great game, throwing for 248 passing yards and 7 touchdowns, and only on 14 completions. So he was getting some big chunk plays all game. And as usual, he did a really good job of spreading the ball around to his receiving core and to his weapons and letting them do some of the work. They could have benefited from more of a rushing attack from people not named Josh Jones. That's been the major critique, or at least my critique of them over the course of the season, is that they're very inconsistent with the rushing attack from players not named Josh Jones, and the toll that it can take on the quarterback throughout the season, where he's the primary runner as well. Hopefully he can make it all the way to the playoffs, but the way you can mitigate some of that risk is by spreading it out to some of those other players and making sure that other players are absorbing some of those hits that your starting quarterback otherwise would be taking. So Coach Moss and Coach Windsor have done a really good job with this team, and not enough credit is being given to them at this point for what they've been able to do with this young roster and really getting the absolute best out of these players. On the other side, this Tucson team is going to be very entertaining to watch the rest of the season. They're sitting at 2-7 right now, so not looking great for the playoffs, especially in the Western Conference. But this team was down 21 at halftime, and they fought back to make it a tie game with less than 4 minutes left. Which makes it, or what makes it even more impressive, is that they did it with a pretty balanced attack of passing and rushing. Malik Mitchell, quarterback for Tucson, had some pretty big passing plays that went for scores. Could have been a little bit more consistent in passing. Had a couple interceptions that ended up being the deciding factor, but he was also very lethal on the ground in the red zone for the Sugar Skulls as well. So super impressive comeback attempt by Tucson, but the time is running out for them. They're going to have to go on a crazy run over the last stretch of games here in order to have a shot at making the playoffs, but they're going to be an entertaining watch no matter who they play, and they could prove to play spoiler for a couple teams. They're already the only loss on Vegas's record, so they might be able to add a loss to a couple other teams' records and make some other people's playoff aspirations a little darker. So they might be playing the role of spoiler from here on out if they can't get a run of seven wins in a row here, but yeah, they'll need to get off to a much better start moving forward and put more pressure on the opposition to keep up with them. Because what's been the story for them is that they're having to keep up with their opponent, but their offense is built to be a run first offense, and they need to be able to set the tone and set the pace on offense, get off to a quick start, and then really lean on the opposition and make them play catch up with you. So it's great that they were able to show that they can catch up, but moving forward, you don't want to put yourself in that position every single game. You want to be the one that's getting caught up too, or at least the one setting the tone for how the game is going to go. They're built to play with a lead, but just getting that lead is the problem right now. Last game of the weekend is going to be the Frisco Fighters at the San Diego Strikeforce, and Frisco won this game 44-41. This was the most entertaining game of the weekend, and that's saying something considering neither team really played to their full potential on offense. Both teams looked rough in the passing game, but this game was very exciting and went all the way down to the wire. This was a game that Frisco needed badly. They needed a great bounce back win after getting absolutely thrashed by Green Bay last week. And they got the win to keep up with Green Bay and stay tied for first place. So Frisco really needed this one and they got it. But I will say the Fighters' inability to really orchestrate a consistent passing attack is confusing. They have a receiving group that has Devin McCoy, Cole Blackman, and LJ McConnell, who plays both sides of the ball occasionally, that has big playability, but they just can't seem to get in rhythm these past couple of weeks. I don't know if it's something where because when Trip Harrington first took over for the injured TJ Edwards, he was slinging it all across the yard. Like he had no problem connecting. He had a great passing game, but these past 2 weeks have just not been good. It's no surprise that Frisco's offense operates with a run first mentality because they are so good at running the ball. But you would think that their ability to run the ball as effectively as they do would open things up in the passing game, but they just can't seem to get it clicking over these past couple of weeks, and it nearly cost them this game. So they got the win, got a much needed win in a bounce back after the Green Bay game last week, but they were maybe 10, 11 seconds away from going back-to-back losses for the first time and who knows how long for Frisco. So this could have been very bad for Frisco, but they ended up pulling it out. On the other side, San Diego just can't seem to win the big one at this point in the season. They deserve all the credit in the world for fighting back and fighting through all the adversity that they faced and not able to really get things going in the first half. But when you look at it from the macro view, they've had this same game play out against multiple top teams in the league. The 4 games that they've lost have been by a combined 11 points. So margin for error and the margin of loss has been very minimal. But the record of those 4 games that they've lost of their opponent is 30-5. Think about that. The 4 losses against Vegas, Bay Area twice, and then Frisco. 5 losses amongst those four teams. I know Bay Area is getting counted twice, but just go with it. On the flip side, let's look at their 5 wins on the year so far. Their 5 wins are against opponents that are a combined 15 and 28. Duke City twice, Arizona, San Antonio, and Northern Arizona. So Duke City twice being 0 and 8 kind of skews that a little bit. But when you look at it on the surface, their 4 losses are against teams that are 30 and 5. Their 5 wins are against teams that are 15 and 28. It's not a good look. It's the optics aren't great on that. They struggle to win games against top tier opponents, and if they're able to make it to the playoffs, which I think they will, all their opponents are going to be top tier opponents. So what's going to happen? Quarterback Nate Davis didn't really look comfortable in the game until late in the second half. And he just seemed off with his receivers all day, which is surprising considering this was the first game back for one of his primary receivers, Arthur Jackson III. Rudy Johnson, he is such an invaluable player to this team. He's able to step in for basically just about any skill position that has an injury. He stepped in at running back for the second half of this game, had a couple of rushing touchdowns. He stepped in when Nate Davis was hurt at quarterback earlier this year. He has stepped in at wide receiver. He's done kick returns. He's played DB. He is the ultimate Swiss Army knife for the San Diego team. And he is such a key part of this team, and he is a great athlete as well. His 2 touchdowns late nearly won this game for San Diego, and I don't think either team really deserved, air quote, deserved the win based on how they played in this game, but Frisco ended up walking away with it. And despite some of the struggles of the game, I will say, just based on how the last minute and a half, 2 minutes of the game played out, this is an off the wall certified banger. Highly recommend checking this one out and watching it. San Diego's broadcast quality is great as always, so that certainly helps. But yeah, go check this one out on YouTube. So that was IFL Week 11. Again, 3 games were decided by 3 points or less. IFL is super competitive. Any given Friday, Saturday, or Sunday, whenever the teams are playing, any team can compete with any team. So that's what makes these games so exciting. The gap between the top and the bottom of the league is not nearly as wide as it has been in years past. It's still pretty wide, given what we've seen, but it's definitely not as wide as it was in years past. So looking ahead to IFL Week 12, let's take a look at some of these games. We've got 7 games to look forward to. First one is going to be on Friday night at 7:05 Central. It's going to be Quad City at Green Bay. Green Bay has to be the favorite going into this one. It's just a matter of how much they'll be the favorite by. With Green Bay being 7-2 and Quad City sitting at 4-4 right now, I would imagine Green Bay is going to be a favorite by at least 9.5 points, with an over/under of probably, based on Green Bay's explosive offense the past couple of weeks, which is a weird sentence to say, probably going to be in the low 90s, high 80s, maybe like an 88.5. So this is going to be a good game, and Quad City really needs this one. So we'll see if Malik Duncan and crew can pull off the upset here and get that much needed win to help secure their spot in the playoff race. Moving on to Saturday, the first game of the Saturday slate is going to be the Arizona Rattlers at the Jacksonville Sharks. So a rematch of earlier this season where the Sharks went to Arizona, which was a rematch of an Arena Bowl from years past in the AFL. But Arizona should absolutely thump Jacksonville in this one. Jacksonville made some wholesale changes to their roster. If you go to the transaction page on goifl.com, you'll see they ended up releasing 4 or 5 players, traded one over to Duke City, and signed 4 or 5 new players that were noticeably bigger, at least on paper, in terms of size, height, and weight for some of those same positions. So they're credit to Jacksonville for seeing like, hey, something's broken, we got to fix it, and trying something new. But they're basically out of the playoff hunt at this point, so they're probably just plugging in some young guys and see what they got and see what they can build towards next year. But I would imagine Arizona is going to be a pretty hefty favorite in this one, probably 10.5 to 12.5 points, with an over under probably in the low 90s, like a 91, 92.5. Arizona, like I said, Arizona should absolutely clap Jacksonville in this one. But again, any given Saturday, right? Next up, we've got the Iowa Barnstormers at the Sioux Falls Storm, and this game is going to kick off on Saturday at 7:05 Central. Sioux Falls is probably going to be the favorite in this one just because they are the home team and they have started to look like they've got their act together over the past couple of weeks with Lorenzo Brown at quarterback. Iowa, with their quarterback change back to Darius James Peterson, Kyle King is probably going to be out for a little while, so I would imagine Sioux Falls is going to be the favorite, maybe by 6.5, 5.5 points, somewhere in that range. Because on paper, both teams are much closer than they realize. And Sioux Falls in at 2-6, Iowa at 2-7. They're both in the same area, but Sioux Falls really needs this win in order to continue to climb back into the playoff hunt. And I mean, Iowa does too if they want any hope of it. So this should be a very, very feisty game, very good game to watch. But Sioux Falls, again, probably favored by 5.5, 6.5 points. This total is probably going to be in the low 90s, probably like a 91, 90, 90 and a half, somewhere in that range. So this will be a good one. Sioux Falls, Iowa games are always pretty good, but this one in particular is very important because this is probably an elimination game for either of these teams if they lose. Second game kicking off at 7:05 this week is going to be the Massachusetts Pirates at the Frisco Fighters. And Frisco coming off of a big win versus San Diego. Massachusetts coming off of a nail-biting win against Tulsa. They get back to this conference game, and this one's gonna be an interesting one to see how it affects the playoff hunt. If Frisco can get this win here, they'll be able to stay ahead of or on track with Green Bay since Green Bay plays the night before. So Green Bay has a chance to put a little bit of pressure on Frisco here, depending on how Friday night works out. But Massachusetts really needs this win to stay in the mix of the playoff hunt because Quad City's right behind them, breathing down their neck. And based on how Massachusetts has looked on offense, this Frisco team could take advantage of them and really lay it on them. But the strength of the Pirates is on their defense. So the defense has a tall task ahead of them to slow down this rushing attack and keep their team in the game. I think Frisco is going to be favored here by probably 9.5, 8.5, somewhere in that range, with an over under of in the low to mid 80s, like an 84.5, just because both defenses are pretty good. So I think Vegas and the sportsbook lines are going to expect this to be a low scoring affair with Frisco being favored, but this will be a very good one as well. That could be a preview of a playoff matchup that we potentially see down the line. Next game we've got at 7:05 Central on Saturday is the San Diego Strike Force at the Tulsa Oilers. And San Diego's going to come into this game pissed off, and they are probably going to lay it on the Oilers. The Oilers have not looked good on offense. Their defense can maybe keep them in the game, but I feel like San Diego's going to come in with a chip on their shoulder and really blow this thing open. I would love to see Tulsa stay in the playoff hunt, but it's gonna be very difficult for them to do that. I think San Diego's gonna come in as at least double digit favorites, probably 11.5, 12.5 favorites, with an over under probably low 90s, high 80s, like maybe an 87.5, anywhere 87.5 to a 91.5, somewhere in that range. But I think San Diego's gonna lay it on them, and we're gonna have to see some miraculous plays out of Tulsa in order to even keep up with San Diego, let alone pull off the upset. Last set of games kick off at 8:05 Central, and the first one we're going to talk about is the Northern Arizona Wranglers at the Vegas Nighthawks. This is probably going to be the best game of the entire weekend. Vegas sitting at 8-1, Northern Arizona sitting at 6-3. This is a chance for Northern Arizona to really make a statement and hop on Vegas and potentially jump out to an early lead and put some of the pressure on Vegas. What Vegas excels at is jumping out to a lead through quick passes and rushing with Jerome Johnson. Northern Arizona has a chance to reverse that and really jump ahead here and see if they can sustain a lead and keep a lead against one of the better teams in the league that they'll have to face again later on. So Joshua Jones is on fire at quarterback for Northern Arizona. Vegas will have to see who starts at quarterback. Jerome Johnson got hurt in the Tucson game a couple weeks back. As we know, the league is terrible at communicating injuries and the status of people, so we'll have to wait and see. But if Jerome Johnson plays in this game, I would imagine Vegas is going to be a 9.5, 8.5 point favorite, with the total probably sitting in the mid to high 90s, maybe like a 98.5, somewhere in that range, because both of these offenses can be very dynamic, as we saw last week with Joshua Jones tossing the ball for big chunks of yards, and half of his throws went for touchdowns. So this will be a very exciting game. Hopefully Jerome Johnson will be able to play and will be healthy enough to play, but we'll see what ends up happening. Then the last game of the night and the weekend for the IFL is going to be the Duke City Gladiators at the Tucson Sugar Skulls. And this is going to be a rough watch, but I think this is probably the best matchup for both of these teams at this point. Tucson sitting at 2-7, Duke City sitting at 0-8. Both of them need a win, at least for morale at this point, and their best opportunity to get the win that they so desperately need is against each other. Being that Duke City has not won a game yet this year, they are not going to be the favorites, especially on the road against Tucson. So Tucson's probably going to open up as 8.5, 9 point favorites. And I think this over under is probably going to be a little bit higher than you would anticipate, probably somewhere in the mid 90s, probably like a 94.5, 93.5. Just because Duke City showed that they can score in bunches when they need to, but they just need to take that first 15 minutes of the Arizona game and that last 15 minutes of the Arizona game and just stretch that out to a full 60 minutes and they'll be fine. And they might get their first win of the season. But Malik Mitchell has looked really good these past couple of weeks, and we'll have to see if he can continue that stretch and hopefully get Tucson back in the hunt. So that's IFL Week 12. Should be a great weekend of games. IFL always provides. You can watch these games on YouTube or Caffeine TV. And yeah, if you're going to watch any game this weekend, Northern Arizona, Vegas, and Massachusetts, Frisco are the two that I would recommend. Speaking of Massachusetts, we've got Pirates linebacker Calvin Bundage coming up here shortly, where we're going to talk about his journey through indoor football, some of the adjustments he's had to make from outdoor to indoor football, as well as this year's Pirates team and this defense that is one of the top defenses in the entire league so far this year. So here's Calvin. All right, joining us on the show today is linebacker Calvin Bundage of the Massachusetts Pirates. Calvin, thank you so much for joining us today. How are you?
Man, I'm doing great. Appreciate you having me on. Like I said before, I've been waiting to get on this one, so I'm excited.
Yeah, absolutely. For those that don't know, Calvin is one of the first real people to follow my accounts, and he was the very first person to subscribe to the YouTube channel. So he's been day one. He's a day one guy here for sure. So super excited to get you on, and I appreciate the support you've shown since the beginning, and I'm super pumped to get you on here and talk about your journey.
Absolutely, man. Let's do it.
Yeah. So tell me about your football journey that has led you to this point in your career with the Massachusetts Pirates.
So started out at Edmond Santa Fe High School, and well, actually, I started out at Douglas High School in OKC,
Okay.
and then I decided I didn't want to play on offensive line and D line anymore, so I lost about 70 pounds, switched to playing safety, and then stopped playing football for a year, then came back like 170. Started recruited playing safety at Santa Fe, and then ended up going to OSU, and then had a pretty good career there. And then had a little time, cup of coffee with the Steelers, and then now I'm here with the Pirates. So
Very cool. Well, dropping 70 pounds, that's huge. What was the motivation to switch up from a lineman to going to safety?
I remember seeing I was watching. I didn't feel like a lineman anymore. I didn't want to be a lineman. I was kind of
Right.
following to my brother's footsteps. He was a great offensive lineman, D lineman, but it just wasn't me. And so I quit football and I just started like this weight loss journey. And I remember I was real skinny, and then I started watching highlights of rivals, and it was like the top safeties in Oklahoma. And I was just watching. I'm like, I can do way better than that. And so I think that's where that ambition came from.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
So growing up in Oklahoma and having the chance to go to Oklahoma State, what was that like?
I mean, it was great. I ended up with the only offers I didn't have was Alabama and LSU.
Wow. Okay.
And so I was going to leave, I wanted to leave. I wanted to go somewhere far, Oregon, Arizona State, anywhere far, Notre Dame, Michigan. And at the
Hmm.
last moment, I decided to stay home, and I didn't want to be like everybody else and go to OU because all the top recruits usually go to OU. So I wanted to do
Right.
something different. So I decided to go to Oklahoma State.
That's great. And so you said you switched to safety. How did that transition from safety to linebacker start?
I lost a bunch of weight. I got
Hmm.
hooked up with Ashton Preston, who was like a great DB in Oklahoma, and getting he was getting coached by Clay Mack, who was a DB guru, and so he formed me into a DB. Yeah.
Okay. Cool. So let's talk about the transition from the outdoor game to the indoor game. From the defensive perspective, what's one of the biggest adjustments you had to make to get to a point where you started to feel comfortable with the indoor game?
The decision making is a lot faster, but I would say the most important part of the indoor game is the quickness and the angles, the ability to understand the angles to where you can get those TFLs, get those sacks, you know?
Mhm. Yeah, that seems to be the common theme with some of the folks we've had on here. It's like you don't have time to second guess yourself. Like you gotta make a decision and jump. You gotta go.
Absolutely.
From so this year's team with the Massachusetts Pirates have had an interesting ride so far. So you're sitting at 6-3 right now. Defense has been playing phenomenal, really carrying this team, giving up 10 less points per game than last year. What is it about this group of guys that kind of makes it all work?
Um, we've been going through a rough patch, and like if you ask the whole defense, we feel like we've been playing bad, but we have so much talent that we're just
Mhm.
starting to get oil things through, get the chemistry. Our
Yeah,
chemistry right now is crazy, and we're peaking at the right moment, and that's what you see now.
right. Yeah, you definitely starting to put it all together because it's not often you see teams get held to 20 points, and you managed to do that in your most recent game. So that was a great defensive effort for sure. So you were named a team captain earlier this year, which congratulations on that, by the way. And the team had a couple new additions to the defense over the past month or so. What has the process been like getting them up to speed as a team captain and as a teammate so that they feel comfortable meshing with everybody, but also so the team doesn't necessarily skip a beat either?
It's just being honest with them, honestly, and telling them everything I know and what could help them. Um, get into the game faster and really understand it. It's a lot different from outdoor ball, so.
Hmm.
Um, Honestly, when people come in, you don't really know if they can play because the game is so different from outdoor.
Right,
And so it's just about really just getting them out there and giving them reps and see what they can do. Like
right.
that's really no way around it.
Yeah, it seems like a different skill set where you can't just plug anybody from outdoor into the indoor game. Like it takes a special type of player.
Absolutely.
So, talking on the Pirates organization as a whole, tell us about the Pirates culture. It seems like, from what we see on the Pirates socials, that the team loves playing together and loves working together. What is it about the organization as a whole that you enjoy playing for them?
I enjoy paying for them because the culture is very ambitious. We want to
Mhm.
win, and we want to win right now. And it's all about winning. It's all about championships. It's all about greatness. It's no one in the building that's going to hold you back from doing anything great,
Right.
anything positive. And the culture is, you know, that's pretty much the culture, and that's why if you come here in your head right, you can thrive. Honestly.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, especially with the Pirates. Pirates haven't been around in the IFL for a super long time, but their very first year they won that championship. So that being the mentality every single year, that makes sense, right?
Definitely, we have a very ambitious owner, and it
Hmm.
carries to the rest of us. Like um, he wants to be, he's super ambitious. He wants to make moves and do bigger things, and so it definitely feeds off into the team.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And we've seen you in particular make some very athletic plays on defense this year, including hurdling over some blockers multiple times. What's going through your mind as you're jumping over a blitz pickup like that in the moment? Because I know if it was me, I'd be like, "All right, this is awesome." But what's going through your mind as that's happening?
Nothing. Honestly, those plays that you see me make, I done probably made them plays 1,000 times, just daydreaming throughout the day.
Uh
When I'm
huh.
about to go to sleep at night, like I'm living my dream right now.
Right.
Really.
Yeah, that's great. Is there a specific play call that when it gets called in from the coaching staff, you're like, all right, let's go. It's time to make a play, or is that the mentality every single time you go out there?
Yeah, that's definitely a mentality every time I go out there. Coach Miller, once he give me a certain blitz I like, I know it's game time.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. Um, so you do a great job of giving a bit of a peek behind the curtain of what life looks like as a professional athlete on your social channels. What made you decide to dive in fully to be able to showcase your journey as a professional athlete and show some of the things that are great about it, and you also do a good job of showing some of the stuff that's not as fun at times.
Absolutely. I just felt like I go through so much and I learned so much just through experience that I need to start creating value for people coming up and just giving them value, giving them entertainment. I actually went on a 7-day fast, and after the fast, I had an epiphany to create value to others. And so
Hmm.
that's where I came up with the idea. I'm like, I'm gonna post a video every day. I can
Yeah.
post a 20-second video every day and just put people on game or whether it's entertainment or whatever. So that's where I came with it from.
That's awesome. Yeah, I saw you did the 7-day fast. I'm like, oh man, that's a long time. How was that?
When I had went, it was I went through some soul searching. I
Yeah.
definitely figured out a lot about myself, but
Yeah.
I think the most important thing, it healed my body and my soul and like my
Hmm.
joints and stuff. And so I think everything that I did 3 months ago, even with the diet, with the fasting,
Yeah.
what I was putting into my body, is starting to show now during the season for sure. I
Yeah,
feel
that's
so
great.
good. My body feels great.
Yeah, I mean, losing what you said, 70 pounds in high school to switch up and then going on the fast. And it's just inspiring to see some of the stuff that you post. So I certainly appreciate it. You've inspired me to kind of get after it a little bit more than I have been. So it's definitely working.
Absolutely, and that means a lot.
Yeah. So what are some things you like to do outside of football?
Obviously, I like to do the content creating stuff that took up
Hmm.
a lot of my free time. I'm just very vanilla. I like music. I like movies. That's pretty much it, man. I'm pretty vanilla.
All right. What type of music you like getting into?
Mostly I listen to Yeet. I'm not gonna lie. That's the
Okay.
guy right now.
All right.
Yeah, that's all I pretty much listen to. I enjoy all type of genres of music though, but like when I need
That's
to get
sweet.
going in the zone, it's Yeet for sure.
Little pregame yeet. Get your mind
Absolutely.
right. Yeah. So speaking of pregame, do you have any like pregame rituals or things that you kind of mentally do to prepare yourself? Or tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, pregame is really intense for me. Game day is really intense for me. Literally, when I wake up until the whistle is blown, I'm trying to hold back tears because I'm just ready to play. And
Hmm.
so before pregame, I don't eat much. I like to be light on my feet when I'm playing, but
Right.
I like listen to like Luther Vandross or what else I listen to. Just any type of old school music to kind of calm me down,
Uh-huh.
not get me geeked up. And so I just want to unleash all that emotion and energy when the ball is snapped. I don't want to get geeked up before. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So that's how my
Yeah.
pregame go.
Yeah, I got you. So in Massachusetts, something that the first thing you notice when you watch a Massachusetts broadcast is the turf, the purple and that seafoam green in the end zone. As a player, does it matter? Like, does it make a difference on how you play, or is it just something where it's like, all right, there it is, I'm dialed in.
Yeah, it's just there. It is. It's dialed in for
Hmm.
sure. But I do like our turf. It's a lot better than a lot of teams' turf for sure. It's got
Yeah,
cushion, so
good.
I
Yeah.
don't mind jumping over people on it. Some
Uh-huh.
people turf, I don't want to jump on that. Their turf because I don't know what's gonna happen when
Right.
I come down.
Yeah, I've seen some other teams turfs in the IFL and in some other leagues, and it's like, man, that looks like it might be just some carpet that might have been spray painted. Like that doesn't look like turf.
With some concrete underneath.
Uh-huh. Pirates are sitting at 6-3 right now, just past the midway point of the season. You got a big game coming up against Frisco. What can people expect from this Pirates team through the end of the season?
um, Lights out defense. We're about to run up the stat sheet. Just
Okay.
TFLs, sacks. Very entertaining football.
Yeah.
You about to see how a group of guys bond together. Really about to see something special from the defense. It's about to be amazing. I wish we had like a series of Netflix that could come in and record us and like make a show out of us because it's absolutely nuts. So
Right.
many characters on the team, even our owner, like so much stuff happens.
Yeah.
It's transactions. It's nuts.
Yeah. Yeah, if you pay close enough attention, you're dialed in. I part of the reason why I started off the wall and started doing this is because this is the most entertaining reality show on the planet is indoor and arena football. And that's just from what I see. I don't even see the behind the scenes of what you live every single day.
Yeah, this is like, man, this is like for real last chance you, like
Yep.
a professional setting of last chance you. It's very entertaining.
Yeah, I think indoor and arena football is the most underrated sport in America, maybe even the world. There, I'll say it in the world. Just need to get more eyeballs on it, and that's something I'm hoping to do with off the wall. And the more eyeballs we can get on the IFL and some of the other leagues, I think the better, and the game can grow. So it can be something where it's not just a stepping stone; it can be a destination league in the future. So I'm a huge fan of indoor football, huge fan of arena football, huge fan of yours and the way you play the game. So really appreciate you taking the time again today. Where can people follow you on the different social channels that you got?
You can follow me on Instagram, Calvin underscore Bundage, and it's a link in my profile that will take you to the rest of my social media accounts. So
Okay, cool. Yeah, I'll include a link directly to that in the comments. So if you're watching on YouTube, it'll be in the description here. And if you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, it'll be in the description as well. So you'll be able to click right through to it. So before we dip out of here, Calvin, do you have any parting words for the people?
yeah, no, actually I don't, but I do like that sign back there. That's fire. Off the
Yeah,
wall.
see, thank you, man. Someone's showing some love for the sign finally, right? Yeah, yeah. I was missing I was missing something to make this a real YouTube show, a
Yeah,
real show. And when
yeah,
that came in, I was like, all right, let's go. It's game time.
yeah, yeah, for sure, man.
All right, appreciate you, Calvin.
No problem, man.
Big thanks to Calvin Bundage again for joining the show today, talking about his football journey and this year's Pirates team. Pirates play this weekend against the Fighters, so check that one out on YouTube. That's on Saturday. That's going to be a good one. So Calvin Bundage is definitely going to show out in that one. I'm looking forward to seeing what he does next. All right, in the last segment here, we're going to pivot over to the AFL. We're going to talk about the games that actually happened in AFL Week 5 and touch on some of the ones that were supposed to happen but didn't happen as planned. So we'll get into that in a bit. But the first game of the weekend was on Thursday night, and it was the Rapid City Marshals versus the Washington Wolfpack. And leading into this game, there's a little bit of drama with the Rapid City Marshals. They were having some cash flow issues, for lack of a better term, because the league had not fulfilled its promises from the prior leadership, Lee Hutton and company. They had not fulfilled the promises to be able to basically subsidize some of the payments to the players, and the team basically could not afford to do all those financial obligations on their own. So they weren't able to fulfill those things. So rightfully so, the Rapid City players that they had, they're like, nah, we're not playing, we're not traveling. That was what Rapid City said. Leading up to the game, the players had told some reporters that they didn't know that the game was for sure happening. They were never told by the Rapid City leadership that it was locked in, it was happening, just because the schedule was changing, it was in flux. All the players had gone home since they didn't play the week before. They were all going to meet back up in Rapid City and then travel to Washington. But all the players on the roster for Rapid City were released the day before, and Rapid City basically signed a bunch of local semi-pro players from the Northwest area to play as the Rapid City Marshals on a day or two's notice. They basically had a practice, if that, and then they were going out there and playing in an AFL game. So it wasn't a great situation for Rapid City fans or Rapid City themselves to be in. And it turned out not to be a good situation for the casual fan either, because this was a very, very bad, ugly game. Washington ended up winning this game 76-20, extremely lopsided, but it was ugly in every way possible. Every possible way that this could be ugly, they found it. They found a way. Um, Air quote, Rapid City had 6 turnovers in the first half, and they were as ugly as possible. We're talking pick sixes, we're talking fumbles, we're talking um, bobbled field goal snaps that end up getting blocked and returned for touchdowns. I think they had 9 turnovers on the day. It was just very bad football. And quite frankly, this game should have never been played given the circumstances and given everything that was going on. It was NFL Network had this old show called the NFL Football Follies. Not, I think it was just called Football Follies, where it was like the funny things that happened in games in the year 1974, the year 1975, and it'd show like a player falling on the ground and fumbling a ball and the ball getting bobbled into the hands of the opposing team. This entire game looked like an episode of Football Follies just because it was so sloppy. And it wasn't just Rapid City. Washington looked pretty bad in some spots as well. They had some very glaring mistakes and they really laid it on Rapid City. And there was no reason to. Like they were ahead by 30, 40 points late in the fourth. They were still bombing it. They were still going for it, trying to run up the score, which was a little weird to do given that everybody involved knew the situation. So to run up the score by 50 at that point was a weird flex by Washington. Um, and even though they did score 76, again, they did not look great in this game. And against real teams, they struggle. And on offense, their play calling isn't the most creative. We touched on this in weeks past, and it's not that great. And some of the plays that they ran, like they were backwards passes that ended up getting dropped, and Rapid City picked it up and ran it in for a touchdown. So they're giving up easy points to a team where they probably should have shut them out, given the circumstances that the team had no days practice or 1 day practice to get things together versus a team that's been together for months and months at this point and played multiple games and have had many, many more practices. So this game should not have been played. And to the surprise of no one, Rapid City ended up folding the very next day after the game was played. So another team is no longer operating in the AFL, at least for this year. We'll see what the future holds. But yeah, this was an ugly game that shouldn't have happened, and it was a rough watch for all parties involved. So we went from this comically bad game to this great game the very next night between the West Texas Desert Hawks and the Albany Firebirds. Albany won this one in dramatic fashion, 47-46. Again, a great game. It could not have been more opposite of what we watched with Rapid City and Washington. West Texas laid it on early, and they got creative with their play calling, and I was really impressed with what they did. Last week, the AFL didn't announce it, but they let the teams know, hey, we're doing free substitution. We're not doing Iron Man. There's not going to be any restrictions on subs per quarter, subs per half. So what West Texas did was in red zone situations, they subbed out their quarterback and they brought in Nick Marshall, who is a DB for West Texas, but he played quarterback at Auburn, I think in 2013, early 2010, somewhere in that range. So he has experience playing quarterback, and they ran him basically as a wildcat. He's nimble, he's quick, and he was able to rush in for a couple touchdowns. So it was a creative way to adapt their offense to the rule change, and it paid off early for the Desert Hawks. And wide receiver Jordan Gandy for the Desert Hawks had an amazing game, 10 catches, 130 yards, and 4 touchdowns. Just an unbelievable game for him. And West Texas looked like they were going to walk away with a big time victory here that they needed, and they were going to dethrone Albany as an undefeated team. But Albany being Albany, they found a way to win this game. They have such a great team, such a great coaching staff. They found a way to eke out a win. Darius Prince had 5 catches for 116 yards and 2 touchdowns. He was very impressive all game as expected at this point, but I really want to dive into the last minute of this game. So West Texas was up by 7. They were up 43-36 with about 50 seconds left. They kicked a field goal to go up by 10. So 46-36 with 39 and a half seconds left, somewhere in that range. So Albany's down 10 under normal football rules. This game is pretty much over, but this is arena football. So it's not over until the clock says 0-0-0. Even then, it still might not be over. So Albany gets the ball. They drive down, score a touchdown in 2 or 3 plays very quickly. And so that makes it a 46-42 game. So in the AFL this year, they have an adaptation to the rule book that they took from the spring leagues, from the UFL, XFL, all those, where teams can go for 2, 3, or a 4-point conversion after they score a touchdown. So not many people knew about this, but Albany's coaching staff and team was very aware of this, and they used this at the perfect opportunity. Albany was down by 4, 19 seconds left, somewhere in that range. what better time to go for the 4-point conversion than right there? So they did snap it under pressure, rolls out to the right, throws it to the corner of the end zone, catches it. So it goes from a 10-point deficit to a tie game in less than 30 seconds of game time. A thrilling finish, or so we thought. Ensuing kickoff, there's 5 seconds left in the game. Albany kicks it off. Now in the AFL, there's a thing called the Rouge where there is no touchback in the AFL. If a player catches the kickoff off the net or otherwise and cannot advance out of the end zone, that's 1 point for the kicking team. So it's 46-46. Albany kicks off. West Texas player fields it. Albany team swarms him and takes him down in the end zone for a Rouge. 1 point to Albany. So Albany went from being down by 10 to winning by 1 in the span of 39 seconds of gameplay. Just an unbelievable game, an unbelievable finish. And it was an example of what the AFL can be if it's done right at the team level, at the coach level, at the player level, and to an extent at the league level if everyone does what they need to do. So not very many arena football games have gotten the off the wall certified banger badge, not nearly as much as the IFL at least, but this game is certainly worthy of it just because of how it went down. And this one is one that you can rewatch on the Albany Firebirds YouTube page. Highly recommend you go do that. Next game we're going to talk about, or we're supposed to talk about at this point, was the Southwest Kansas Storm versus the Oregon Blackbears. Now, if you're in the know, that game was originally supposed to be Southwest Kansas Storm versus Billings, but the schedule got rearranged. Nobody really knows why or what the reasoning was, but it got switched from Billings to Oregon. So Oregon was supposed to travel to Southwest Kansas, but that ended up getting canceled for reasons we don't 100% know at this point. So Southwest Kansas ended up rescheduling to play a team called the Cedar Rapids River Kings of a league called the AIF. And they ended up thrashing the River Kings. It was final score 68-12. So it was absolute beatdown. But this goes down in the record book as Southwest Kansas winning via forfeit versus Oregon 2-0. So in the history books and in the old sports almanac, this is going to be a 2-0 win for Southwest Kansas. But they just wanted to play. They wanted to play somebody. And as of the time of recording this, Oregon is no longer listed on the AFL site. They had an agreement that they were going to come on not as a member of the East or West, but as an independent team to, I guess, kind of be a schedule filler where it's needed. But apparently something has changed over the past couple of weeks with that specifically. So recording this on Monday night, just for full transparency, but by the time this comes out on Wednesday, we might have a little bit more information as to the reasoning for that, why they're no longer listed on the website, or what the deal is. But very chaotic situation with Southwest Kansas in particular. That shouldn't be a surprise, but again, scheduling changes the week of have become the new norm for the AFL for this year, which is unfortunate. They need to get this sorted out, and they need to get consistent with the scheduling moving forward just to avoid any other negative press that they continue to get through situations like this. The next game we're going to talk about is the Wichita Regulators at the Salina Liberty, and Salina won this game very decisively, 54-25. Salina looked really, really good in this game, and more importantly, they looked in control from the beginning of the game to the end of this game. They jumped out to an early 19-0 lead, and they held on to a double-digit lead throughout the entire game. Wichita had a chance to kind of make some noise. They ended up getting the deficit down to 14 right before or heading into halftime, but Salina was able to step on the gas and really take advantage and put their experience both in players and coaching staff to use to really blow this thing open in the second half. They had scored 47 through 3 quarters, and they did a very good job of working the clock in the fourth quarter to make sure that they took as much time off of the game clock as possible to ensure that there was no chance of shenanigans from Wichita. Because as we saw with Albany, they scored 11 points in 39 seconds. So it's not out of the realm of possibility to erase a 22-point deficit in the fourth quarter. So Salina did a really good job of closing it out. Quarterback Charles McCollum had 4 passing touchdowns, and Tracy Brooks for Salina had 2 rushing touchdowns. And we don't have a lot of specific stats because There weren't any like recorded on the AFL's website. That's just from the broadcast, what they were able to tell us at the end. So Albany, West Texas had specific stats, which was nice. That was great to see, but none of the other games did. So Wichita, again, slow start, but just could not get much going outside of the second quarter. Into the first through the second quarter, they scored 19, and that was primarily the only opportunity that they had to really make an impact. And they got to play 4 quarters of football against any team in the AFL, especially Salina. Salina has made a case for being not one of the best teams, but they are right on that next tier where they're really good and they have a chance to knock off one of those best teams on any given Saturday, any given Sunday, whenever the game is played. So Salina is going to be a very good team, and they're not going anywhere. Wichita, on the other hand, with the amount of teams that have left the league or folded or ceased operations, they are 100% towards the bottom. You can make the case that they're at the bottom. You can make the case that they're second from the bottom, but they're down there somewhere, and it's a rough go for Wichita, and it's going to be a rough go for them for the rest of the year, depending on what the schedule looks like and how adjustments get made to the schedule. But regardless of who they play, it's going to be tough to see them get another win this year. And the last game we're going to talk about is the Nashville Cats versus the Orlando Predators. And Orlando won this game 69-62. So we had ourselves an old school shootout in the jungle in Orlando. And Caleb Walls is wide receiver for Orlando. He is one of the most dynamic, and he might be the fastest player in all of arena football. He had himself quite a day. He had 4 touchdowns on the day. He had a kick return touchdown. He had multiple receiving touchdowns. He was just all over the place, making it happen. Drew Powell, quarterback for the Predators, he did a really good job of orchestrating drives, and he looked very comfortable in the play calling and execution on offense for the Predators, which looked horrendous a few weeks back in the first matchup with West Texas. Looked extremely good in this one. This was a well-rounded game for the Predators. I mean, they scored 69 points, of course it was, but they had great efficiency out of their offense. Their special teams showed up with Dylan Barnes on field goals, extra points, and deuce attempts, kick returns from Caleb Walls. This was a very well-rounded game, and even the defense got in on the scoring through a strip sack of Dalton Oliver in the end zone. On the other side, for Nashville, quarterback Ramon Atkins started this game, but he got off to a very rough start, and the Predators jumped off to a very large lead because of it. They ended up making a switch, which makes sense. Dalton Oliver had a great game against Wichita either last week or a few weeks back at the neutral site game in Clarksville, where he threw for 7 touchdowns. So it was a little surprising to see him not start, but I guess they wanted to see what Atkins could do. Ended up pulling Atkins. Oliver went in, started to make things happen, but eventually got hurt on a strip sack in the end zone that the Predators ended up scoring on. So quarterback Ramon Atkins had to come back in the game, and he looked a lot better when he came back in the game. He orchestrated quite a comeback attempt. They had a hook and ladder play reminiscent of 2007 Boise State, if you know what I'm talking about there. But they had a hook and ladder play where one receiver caught it and pitched it to another who was running full speed the opposite direction. They had a 4-point conversion that we now know about because of the Albany game the day before. So they just ran out of time. But this was a very, very fun game to watch and would highly recommend checking this one out. It's on Vire.tv. I would imagine it'll be on YouTube at some point, but it's for sure on Vire.tv for the foreseeable future. And this is a matchup of 2 very good teams that, depending on how the playoffs work out, both these teams could and should make the playoffs. And if they potentially meet again in the playoffs, this will be a fun watch. And that's the show. Thank you so much for taking the time to check it out. Big thank you again to Calvin Bundage for joining the show today, and best of luck to him this upcoming weekend against the Frisco Fighters. Big week of IFL and AFL football coming up ahead, so excited to dig into some of those. And again, please follow us on socials at Off the Wall FB, F as in foot, B as in ball, Off the Wall FB on Instagram, X, aka Twitter, and TikTok. Posting all sorts of things on each of those. So join in on the fun and come say hi. And if you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, please give us a 5-star rating. And if you're watching on YouTube, please give us a thumbs up and subscribe and pass this along to a friend that you think might enjoy it. Let's see how much we can grow this thing. there's only 24 hours in a day, and the fact that you chose to spend an hour and a half roughly of that with me today means a lot. So really appreciate you checking it out and supporting the mission that we're doing here to kind of grow arena and indoor football to be as big as we can. Great weekend of football ahead. Come say hi on socials if you're going to be watching any of the games. I certainly will. And yeah, we'll see you next time.